Let's take our Bibles tonight and go to Exodus 14. We will soon be starting our series back up in Genesis, going through the life of Joseph. Right now we're in Exodus 14. Have you ever felt like panicking? You ever seen somebody panic over a bee? Isn't that always funny? You know, Archie, man, he's not intimidated by any type of stinging bug. We were out working, and he's like poking the hornet's nest just for fun. And he's like, they probably won't sting me. And they didn't. They stung me and Michael. Archie didn't get stung one time. I think the hornets looked at him and were like, I ain't messing with him. You know, sometimes we panic over silly things, but a lot of times we genuinely have circumstances in our life where we feel trapped and we want to just panic. Well, our text today shows us how to deal with those times, how to deal with those trials. What we've got to realize is that God is in control and God is present and God will see you through whatever he brings you to. And what we see, the instruction given to the children of Israel through Moses, is that when you face a challenge that makes you want to panic because you feel trapped and there's no way out, still your mind, steady your direction, and see your God. Israel's been in captivity for, anyone remember how long? 400 years. Now, just to put that in perspective, the United States has existed for almost 250. Okay, so they had been in slavery for 400 years. And this guy shows up named Moses. Israel didn't like him the first time he showed up. So then he runs through the wilderness for 40 years and comes back. And he has his brother Aaron. And Moses says, I am here to deliver you from slavery. Yahweh sent me here. Jehovah sent me here. And by the way, if you're not aware, Yahweh and Jehovah are the same Hebrew word. It has different spellings and different pronunciation because it's a Hebrew word that they're putting English letters on. So if you see it, it's the same word. Did y'all know that? Okay, yeah. So if there are some like cults that are like, no, it has to be one way. And it's like, if you only knew how ignorant you are. Yeah, that's a good place to say amen right there. So Moses and Aaron show up and they say, hey, and what does Jehovah or Yahweh translate to? Anybody know? I am. So they say, hey, I am sent us here. And Pharaoh says, I don't know I am. And I don't know you. I don't care about you. I'm not letting the people go. And so God sent 10 plagues through Moses. And finally, Pharaoh, after the death of his firstborn, says, all right, enough. I will let the people go. And so they leave. And this is where our story picks up. Israel finds themselves literally between a rock and a hard place. Chapter 14, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea over against Baal-zephon. Before it ye shall encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. So God tells Moses, bring Israel up to the border of the Red Sea, and in this particular spot, the wilderness was too mountainous and too thornish, what's the word? There's a word where it's like thick as, yes, that word, brushage. There's too much brushage. They can't travel through it. There's a word, though, isn't there? Does it matter? We're moving on. We're all awake now. We're moving on. They can't cross the terrain because it's too shrubberish. I think that should be a word. And so Pharaoh, he's like, I got them trapped. They are stuck where they are. And Bible scholars estimate there's about 2 million Israelis, 2 million Jews here. So this is a huge number. It's not like one guy who can run through a tiny little trail through the woods. Now, this is a giant nation of people. All right, let's keep reading. We're in verse 5. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with a high hand. Remember, when they left, the Egyptians were so ready for them to leave, they spoiled them. They said, here, take this gold. Here, take this food. Take this grain. But now, verse 9, the Egyptians pursued after them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth before Baal-zephon. Verse 10, then Pharaoh drew near, and the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. By the way, that is the right response. And pray. Pray. Don't panic. Cry out to the Lord. Well, their prayer, though, didn't end in faith just yet. They had some things they had to process through to get to that place of faith. Verse 11, and they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. Man, how quickly they forget. Right? I mean, do they not remember the frogs? Do they not remember the gnats? Do they not remember the cattle that died and the 3 days of darkness and the fire and brimstone that came from the sky? Now they're in a new place with a new trial, and they say, you were all going to die, Moses, and it's your fault. You should have listened to us. We told you so. I would rather live in slavery than come out here and die. Wouldn't that be better? And again, think with me, though. All they've known their entire life and their entire parents' life and their entire grandparents' life and great-grandparents' life, all they've known is 400 years of bondage, 400 years of slavery. They think they're going to die. Look at what Moses says in verse 13. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. For the Egyptians who you seen today, you shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Yeah, you know what Moses is telling them to do? Essentially, still your mind. Yeah. Hold your peace, yeah. Be quiet. Stand still. Don't be afraid. You will see God's salvation. You will see God's deliverance. Stand still. You know, when instead of panicking, you know what I need to do? Just still my mind first. Now look at what the next verse says. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Why are you crying to me, Moses? Speak unto the children of Israel that they what? Go forward. Now this is not a contradiction. This is a step 1 followed by step 2. Still your mind so that you can steady your direction. and then you will see your God come through. Let's keep reading the rest of this story. This is one of my favorite stories in all the Bible, but they're all really good. Verse 16. But lift thou up thy rod, stretch out thy hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh, and upon all his hosts, and upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when they have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, upon his horsemen. The angel of God, by the way, the angel of God in the Old Testament is who in the New Testament? Jesus. The angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed. So he was in front of Israel. He went behind Israel. He removed and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before their face and stood behind them, and it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. It was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked into the host, the army of the Egyptians, through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. So the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared. The Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and horsemen and all the hosts of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians. And the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Oh, when panic arises, providence is already in place. So let's examine how that unfolds. Number one, consider with me the providence of God. Providence is a great word that we use in the theological realm that refers to the fact God is in control behind the scenes. God is the hand inside the glove. Now, you don't always see the hand. You sometimes only see the glove, but God is in control. God is guiding. God is directing. That's what providence means. God is not caught by surprise. His plans have not been stopped or halted. He is in control. But to us, it often doesn't look that way. Have you ever seen anyone making tapestry? Do we know what tapestry is? Yeah, okay. Tapestries, they would sew fabric together, and it usually turns into this really nice, beautiful picture. It's like, how did you do that with needle and string? Well, from the bottom looking up, you know what it looks like? It's just a giant mess. Looks like something my toddler would have piled together and called a picture. But from the perspective of the one making it, it's a beautiful piece of work. And the one making it is the only one that knows the end in mind. And the ones underneath looking up at all those strange chords that doesn't look right to us. That is very much how the providence of God operates in our life. We may look up and think, man, this is not making any sense. God, why would you allow this? God, why would this happen? God, why would I go through this when I'm trying to serve you? And it may not make sense to us, but from God's perspective, he has a plan, and his plan is always better than ours. Every time. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God? He's never like, oh, I didn't factor in that Pharaoh was going to show up. If I'd had known that, I wouldn't have sent you there. No, God knows it all, and he's involved in it all. Let's just walk through this. First, consider with me, God guided Israel. Who was it that told Israel to go camp where they would be hemmed in on all three sides? God. That was verses 1 and 2. I'm not going to try to pronounce those big words there again. But God says, hey, go camp there. Now, okay, if I'm Israel, if I'm Moses, I'm like, God, I did what you told me to do, and now look. What is wrong with you? Why would you tell me to do this and I do it and now this happened? Sometimes we're doing what God's telling us to do, and we say, okay, well, it's not working. You ever felt like that? It's not that it isn't working. It's just we can't see it yet. God guided Israel. Can I tell you, God's path often runs through places that we would never choose. But can I tell you, those places that we wouldn't choose are always better than the ones we would at the end of the day, when we see God come through. Well, also consider God not only guided Israel, but God governed Pharaoh. Did you see that God predicted this whole thing to Moses, and then that's exactly what happened? Hey, Moses, lead the children of Israel here. I'm going to make Pharaoh mad. He's going to try to kill you, and then I'm going to be glorified. Moses didn't get all the details, right? Moses didn't know the sea was going to part. He just knew, you're going to make Pharaoh mad. He's going to try to kill us, and you're going to be glorified. Okay. That sounds like a great, it's like we're missing a few instructions here. I think there's a page missing of this manual. You know what, though? God will tell us enough for us to obey in faith. He doesn't always tell us every detail because we're supposed to trust him. We're supposed to trust his goodness, his person, not necessarily his plan. Does that make sense? Sometimes, I got to trust this plan will work. No, it's not about trusting the plan will work. It's about trusting the person who wrote the plan, that he's smart, he's in control, and he will work it out. Now, let's just talk through this hardening of hearts. Sometimes that can be a challenge to understand. This is what we would call judicial hardening. Everybody say judicial hardening. Judicial hardening. Hey, what that means is God is judging Pharaoh by hardening Pharaoh's heart. God is judging the choices of Pharaoh by hardening Pharaoh's heart to further go down the path that Pharaoh's already chosen. It's not that God made Pharaoh evil. It's that God solidified the evil that Pharaoh chose. And that's an important application because it means this. One day, if you keep turning away from God, God may judge and say, okay, have it your way. And that is all, and that happens in the New Testament, Romans 1. When God gives people up to a reprobate mind. This idea of a hardened heart. It doesn't mean that God's sovereignty was limited by whatever Pharaoh would have chosen. It just means this. Pharaoh can choose whatever he wants, and God will still get the glory. And God was governing the story. And also consider with me, God glorified himself. Providence always brings glory to God. God glorified himself. Look again at verse 4. It says, The last part says this, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. He says it twice in this chapter. I will be honored by Pharaoh. How is somebody who's dead set on dishonoring God going to bring God honor? God's providence. You realize Pharaoh is doing everything he can to not bring God glory. And God is so in control, Pharaoh can do whatever he wants, and God still gets glory through the life of Pharaoh. And Egypt knows that Jehovah is the one true God. Now, does the providence of God negate the free will of man? Of course not. Does the free will of man negate the providence of God? Of course not. Now, I liken the providence of God and our choices to kind of like a GPS. Not a perfect illustration, okay? But you ever make a wrong turn on the GPS and then it just reroutes you? And just reroutes you, and it just reroutes you. See, God, it doesn't matter what turn a person makes, he can just reroute everything to still get his perfect will accomplished and his end goal done. That's his providence. So what does this mean to me? Well, first off, it means this. I have a God that I can rely on. He's in control. When somebody mistreats me, when somebody betrays me, when somebody attacks me, God is still in control, and I can rely on him. It also means, though, that I have choices I'm responsible for. Both are true. When I feel like my world is crumbling, though, I need to realize it's not falling apart. It's falling into place, and trust the providence of God. He is in control. And once we see his providence, we can rest in his protection. Because the same hand that guides us also guards us. And that's what we see in our story, the protection of God. Now think about this with me. God did not protect Israel from the trial. He protected them through the trial. Do you see the difference? He didn't protect them and shield them from ever having to walk through it. No, he just walked through it with them and protected them as they journeyed through the Red Sea. And that's what God often does with us. Consider with me God's protecting provision. Here's what he does. He provides a way of escape for them and protects them. Verses 10 through 8, he parts the Red Sea. Now let's just walk through this instruction. We already read it, but let's walk through it again. Israel's complaining, you should have let us die. Verse 13, Moses said unto the people, fear not. Stand still. See the salvation of the Lord. Don't be afraid. Now, that's easy for us to read. It's hard for them to do it when could you imagine the premier army of the day, of the world, coming to kill you? And it's not like they have guns where we die quickish. I mean, they're coming with little curved knives and chariots. And I mean, this is brutal, ancient warfare. And you're telling me not to be scared right now. Moses, are you hearing yourself? You should be scared with us. Moses, though, knew that God's providence would result in God's protection. So stand still, settle your mind, shut your mouth. Verse 14. As hold your peace. Maybe try that one. I don't want Asa to say, shut up. I don't, because he doesn't know the right and wrong context. He's too little. So please don't say that around my child. If you do, it's okay. I'll forgive you. But I'm going to switch it. Hold your peace. Hold your peace. Sometimes the right thing is just, all right. All I can speak is a complaint, so I'm just going to be quiet. Settle my mind, still my mind. And then he says this in the next verse, move forward. Go forward. The command to move forward, by the way, it came before the seas parted. Did you catch that? All right, everybody, march towards the water. Okay, so we're going to drown. Thank you. We're all going to die still. Death by sword, death by drowning. And as they walk, they see Moses hold out his rod and that's pretty good. I'm going to start a career as a cartoon sound effects guy. And the ground that was a sea is now bone dry. Now, this is a nation of all ages. They got little kids, they've got elderly people, they've got mules that don't go as fast as military horses and chariots. So it's not just enough to have a way out, they need to have protection from behind. And that's what we see in the next point, God's protecting presence. He provided them a way forward, and his presence shielded them from the attacks coming from behind. The pillar of cloud by day and fire by night went behind them, and to Egypt it was darkness. To Israel it was light. So Israel, here they are in the middle of the night walking through dry water. They see the wall of water on this side. Oh, dry land in the sea, you know what I mean. Wall of water on that side. And they have this fire cloud behind them, shining light on them as they go across. And Egypt, it's already dark. And now it's extra dark because they're in a fog, and not a single Egyptian soldier finds a single Jew all night long. In Egypt, when they get into the middle of the sea, God starts to attack them. He yanks the wheels off of the chariot so that they're stuck. And the soldiers say, all right, at this point, we've got to leave. Daylight appears, and of course, God closes the sea, drowns the Egyptians. Here's the point we need to remember from this. God doesn't always shield us from going into a trial, but God always shields us when we are in a trial. So when I'm in a trial, you know what I need to find? I need to find God's provision. All right, where can I go? Where are you leading through this? And then I need to lean in to his presence. The presence of God settles my fears and terrifies my enemies at the same time, through stilling my mind and steadying my movements. Yeah. But God's protection, it's not just random. It has an ultimate purpose, and that leads us, number 3, the purpose of God. We see his purposes unfold. We've mentioned it already. One of his purposes is to bring himself glory. We talked about that when we talked about his providence. But God also had a purpose for Israel. Consider with me in verses 30 and 31. First off, it was for Israel to recognize God. Now, you would have thought they already did. You'd have thought, the water turned to blood. That's enough. You would have thought all of the plagues and all of the fact that that God sent Moses to deliver them would be enough. But it wasn't enough for at least the majority of them. And God had to bring them to a trial so he could bring them through a trial so that they would see he's in control. If I told you I was really strong, okay, let's just say I told you I'm the strongest man in the world. Okay, I'm not telling you. You don't have to laugh that loud. But let's just say I told you, and you said, all right, prove it. I said, watch this. Easy for me. Left-handed, that doesn't show anything. So here's Jehovah God telling Israel, trust me with your life, with your future. I'm going to make a covenant with you. I'm going to give you scriptures that are going to last through eternity. God's got to show himself strong, not for God to show himself strong. He was there when he created this world, but for Israel to see, you know what? God can actually back up who he claims to be. And when we read passages like there's a peace that passes all understanding, that joy is found no matter what the circumstances are, that the Spirit of God produces self-control that you can't have outside of the Spirit of God. When we see these things, God has to show them to us. And what proves the promises of God to be true when they are tested, when they are tried, and we call those trials. God brings us through trials. God brings us through challenges and hard times so that we recognize him on a deeper level. Israel needed to recognize God. They needed to see deliverance from Egypt was permanent. But also, it was for Israel to reverence God. It says in the verse 31, it says, the people feared the Lord. That's a big step forward from where they were in verse 9? Or wherever it was they were complaining about they were going to die. That's a pretty big step forward. They went from, you brought us out here to die, to, yes, Lord, you are in charge. Sometimes we fail to give God the glory due to his name. And God puts us through a challenge so that we just remember how small we are and how big he is. I can't tell you how many times a trial has increased my reverence for the Almighty. Many of you were here for the time of my life when I got COVID. I couldn't do this for about 3 months. I was so weak from it. Do you know what I realized through that? I just realized how frail Josh Williams was. Because you're 20, well, how old was I? 23? You just think you're invincible. You're still young. You got a long time to live. You now you're adulting. I mean, it's like not even prideful, just naturally. You think you're invincible. And God went at me like a toothpick. And I was like, wow, you know what? I am absolutely frail. And it's God that sustains my life, whether I'm in my 20s or older. You know what God is doing to Israel through this trial is he is showing them, hey, without me, you ain't going to make it, pal. You need to trust me. You need to rely on me. And trials do that. They reestablish our fear. And then also, not just for Israel to reverence God, but for Israel to rely on God. It says, the people believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Now, why is it important that they would believe Moses? Well, yes, he's leading them through the wilderness. Yes, he is. But more importantly, is Moses was going to establish the Torah, the Old Testament. And from the Old Testament would be built not just the first 5 books, but the books of history, the books of poetry, the prophets, which predicted that the New Testament would come. And who is that ultimately? Jesus Christ. So Israel believing Moses ultimately leads to believing the Messiah. And that is important. And do you know why God often brings us through a trial? To grow our faith so that we learn to rely on him. God often brings you through something that you cannot handle, so you actually learn to rely on his strength. If I can handle it, I don't know really if I'm relying on the strength of the Lord or not. And Israel's brought to a place literally between a rock and a hard place, and God brought them there so he could bring them through it so that they would believe the Lord, so that they would trust the Lord. God brings glory to himself through this story, but he also produces good in his children. And that's what he does for us. So what does this look like day to day? Well, when I go through a trial, I need to say, all right, where is God in this? Where is the providence of God? I may not always see him. I may not always understand it, but where is he? I need to reverence God and rely on him. There was a train they were building in Africa. This is back in the 1800s. Some of the English settlers were building this train, and it was a bridge that went from one mountain to another, and down below in the valley was where a local village was. And the train went over the bridge, and the village people were absolutely terrified. They'd never heard a sound like that, never seen anything like that, and they were scared to death that that bridge was going to collapse. They were going to all die, and they were terrified. Well, then they ran the train back across, and they ran it across again. And guess what? Time after time, the bridge stood strong, and eventually the people who lived in that village were no longer terrified by the train because they had seen that bridge hold it so many times they knew it would continue to do so. When God brings you through a trial, you know what it does? It just shows that, hey, you know what? God's grace held me up again. And the same grace that held me up yesterday is going to hold me up tomorrow. There's never a pain without a greater purpose. There's never a heartache without a greater healing. And there's never a trial that doesn't lead to a greater triumph. If you will settle your mind, steady your movement, and you'll see your God. Trust the Lord. Recognize His providence. Rest in His protection. And you will realize His purpose. So what in life has you cornered? Is it a health challenge? Is it difficulty at work? Is it a relationship? Can I tell you, if God brought you to it, He will bring you through it. Trust Him. Trust Him. And when you're hemmed in by trouble, remember you are held in by grace. One of my favorite songs, the chorus says this: I wouldn't know your peace without the hard times, or be thankful for relief without the pain. I wouldn't love the light if it were not for darkness, or appreciate the sun without the rain. How could I understand forgiveness without failure, feel the warmth of love without the bitter cold? How could I hold your healing hands without affliction, and be blessed to see your mercies all unfold? Sure, it's a blessing to be safe, secure, and warm. But Lord, I want to thank you for the storm. You know, providence is God's purposes disguised as a problem. So still your mind, steady your direction, and you will see your God. Now for Israel here, it happened in one night. It didn't always happen in one night. Sometimes it's years. There's some trials Paul went through that lasted years. But you know what? The thicker the trial, the greater the purpose. We can trust the Lord. With heads bowed and eyes closed, let's take a moment to pray however the Lord spoke to your heart. Friend, don't panic when trouble arises. Rest in the fact that God is in control. God knew what would happen before it did, and He's already planned out the solution. Before you were ever born, He solved every problem you would ever face. Let's trust Him. Let's be still. Fear not. Stand still. See the salvation of the Lord. Move forward. God will part your Red Sea if you will trust Him. And you will grow in your faith and in your respect for the Lord God Almighty. I'll give everyone a chance to pray privately, however the Lord spoke to your heart. But I do want to say this first. If you are not sure that you're a Christian, if you are not sure that you are on your way to heaven when you die, you've heard of the story of Jesus, but you've not yet trusted it. You've not yet trusted Him to forgive you. Friend, that is the first step. You've got to get that settled. If you are already saved, will you trust the Lord with the things He brings you to? I'll give everyone a chance to pray however the Lord spoke to your heart. Father, thank you so much for the privilege that we have to pray. Thank you for your word and how it guides us and directs us. And something that happened thousands of years ago still speaks to where we are today. Lord, I pray you'd help us all to trust you. And Lord, I thank you for the trials because they grow us, they deepen our faith, they develop our character. Lord, they bring glory to your name. But it's not easy going through them. So Lord, I pray you'd give us grace as we walk and navigate through those. Lord, be with those that are even this week in the middle of their Red Sea or in the middle of their panic. Lord, would you speak peace, show up, and show them your protection, your providence, and your purpose. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.